A good Sam steps in just as a Texas cop is getting a lesson in what it's like to be used as a human punching bag. We have video. Don't be scared. I work with the police, little girl. How do you tell when a cop who claims he is really isn't? A cop barks an order to a dirtbag who sits up and says, "I give up." An amazing lesson in how a little doggerel ended one standoff. The new Taser Cam covering your front, back, and butt. And while we're on the topic of dogs, who says all horned dogs come young? We'll break that myth as we shake, rattle, and roll another edition of Crime Time. Crime Time, an audio and video service for cops and anyone else who happens to sneak through the turnstile, is a service of In the Line of Duty, world leader in law enforcement video training, featuring our unusual cast of sordid and unsavory characters, and playing the part of Dr. Angela Wingo this week. Not quite as well, but still, is Steve Hadley, Taser International. Sergeant retired Richard Simpfer, who has an amazing run as a technical advisor for In the Line of Duty for the last 62 years. Captain Kevin Murphy, a fine, young, handsome, virile Irish cop who has single-handedly kept the Clayton, Missouri Police Department afloat since 1979. Kevin, did I get those lines down that you wrote for me, right?
Sounds good, Ryan.
And one of our favorite crime timers, the sartorially splendiferous and magnificent specimen known to his officers as Deputy Chief Gregory Hawkins of the St. Louis Metro Police Department, and to his wife as Hey You, and who doesn't look a bit Chinese. A Texas officer finds himself as close to toast as he ever hopes to get again when he stops a suspicious vehicle. A passenger of rather large proportions proceeds to exit the vehicle, and instead of cooperating with the officer's instructions, he proceeds to attempt the officer's systematic destruction. Watch and cringe.
Get your hands up. Get your hands up.
What we're going to see from the in-car video is the officer approach the passenger side of the suspect vehicle,
Get your hands up.
ask him to get out of the vehicle, which is standard procedure.
The routine disturbance call turned violent in just seconds.
And then the assault begins.
What McKinney Police Corporal Russell May didn't know was that his attacker, Joshua Jones, was an escaped convict from Colorado.
He more or less was saying, "You ain't nothing, I'm fixing to do you, or I'm going to do you." Well, at that point, I realized that, this is all for keeps. To me, I take it as that he's trying to kill me.
Jones repeatedly punched and slammed May against his own patrol unit. A witness rushed to help the officer and could be heard on tape pleading with Jones to stop. He and fellow officers are grateful to Wilkins and other citizens who called 911 to help them prevent the attack from escalating.
Nothing more to sure save my life and the people around.
Crime timers, you've seen this officer get the whacked out of him. Richard Simpfer, what's your take?
Well, a lot of the response on the email are pretty critical of the officers and the officer, and says he doesn't fight back and so forth. I really beg to differ. I see him try to grab the person's arm. I see him trying to do handgun retention. I see him at first try to go for his weapon, but I think every officer out there knows you cannot draw that weapon quick enough when somebody is on you. So I think a lot of things are going through his mind. How violent is this? It's becoming more violent. Can I control him? Can I disengage? And it's a lesson to all of us that in a split second, we can go from approaching somebody who might need help, which is what the call is about, to a violent encounter because we do not know who we're dealing with at any time.
Greg Hawkins, did this officer make a mistake by having too large an area of control, knowing that this was a potential felon he was stopping?
Not necessarily. I think that's one of the risks we all take when you're dealing with a human being. You can't just walk up and grab him out or pull a gun on him or anything of that nature if he hasn't done anything wrong. You have to treat him civil. If an individual then attacks you, you have to do the best you can to, as Sinford just said, the gun retention is the main thing. And if immediately when the guy started fighting him, you saw the officer reach for his gun, he wasn't able to get it at that time. And this should be a reminder to all officers that we can be beat. And if we are beaten bad enough or knocked unconscious, our weapon becomes the weapon of that suspect at that time.
Kevin Murphy, what is your take on this?
Well, again, hindsight's 20/20, and that's what we all have, is the clear light of day to look at this. But as these gentlemen have already said, you want to retain that weapon. And the problem simply is that officers do this every day. It is a routine, and we have a tendency to let our guard down when we go into these situations expecting that they're going to work out okay. And when they don't, sometimes we're the most surprised people around.
Steve Hadley of Taser, you're an ex-cop, suburban Phoenix. Would you have drawn your gun at any point in this evolution?
I believe I would have, if I would have had the ability to do so. I think, just like they had reflected here too, he tried to, he was unable to. He then went into a protective mode. Again, if he's knocked unconscious, then he can get the gun, and there's another danger involved there as well. So I think he did a good job.
Rich, let me ask you, would you have drawn your gun and used lethal force and been justified?
Well, again, it's 20/20, but he attempted. You could see him push back, go for the gun, and the guy is on top of him. If anybody has been through edged weapon training, they know that a person from across the room can run across that room and stab him 3 or 4 times before you can get that gun out. There is no way he could get it out. So now we secure it, we keep it secure, and we try to do defensive tactics, whether that is gouging eyes, biting, whatever. What I think is really important here and that officers need to pay attention to is the good citizen that stepped in and really helped him. Here is a person that is putting themselves at risk and jumping in and helping this officer and probably saved him from a good beating or even possibly being killed. And when we're out there, we need to kind of keep in mind how we're treating everybody, because here's a person that for whatever reason said, I'm going to step in and help. And I think that's a message we all ought to keep in mind.
Greg Hawkins, you were on the street for umpty-ump years. Was there any occasion where you ever wished, hey, I need a good Samaritan to jump in here?
Several occasions. Yeah, and I think that's one reason we always say we'd rather be 2 men than 1 man. There's been several occasions where I've been on the street and in the Pruitt-Niagara projects, for instance, at some time by myself and wanted citizens to assist or help. So this guy gets my congratulations for helping the officer. But one other thing I would like to say, Ryan, too, is that it goes back to something I said on a previous show. We usually try to retain people. And if you watch this officer, even when he had the gentleman in a headlock, he never used his hands, he never hit him. As Rich just mentioned, he didn't bite him, he didn't gouge his eyes. And you see, all these things are things you need to do to survive. He attempted to hold him, to hold on to him, to struggle with him. And that's why we lose a lot of fights, because these people are fighting, tremendously fighting with everything, and we're trying to restrain.
I'd like to jump in here. I mean, it's a perfect example. But imagine the next step. When you see this on video and the 20 seconds that is shown by the media of the officer punching him in the nose, biting his ear, gouging his eye, because it is a life and death situation, they'd be, you and the administration would be on there saying, well, we're investigating, it looks violent, you know, it looks ugly, but it's something officers need to really, their safety is number one.
Right, and I disagree when you say me. I wouldn't, and I was the inspector of police for 3.5 years, as you're well aware. Not so. I think that you have to remember that even officers who attain the rank of deputy chiefs or chiefs, lieutenant colonels, whatever, have been on the street. and they know as well as any of us what goes on there. I think sometimes the reality is if you see this guy getting beat and he does whatever he has to do to survive, I'd be very hard pressed to be critical of him. Now, I think that if all we saw was 20 minutes of the officer gouging and biting and kicking and didn't see what had happened before, sure, we'd all be critical. But that's why it's important to be able to see it from the beginning to the end.
Kevin, what do you? Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Well, I didn't mean to be that you'd have to be critical. What I meant is the brass in your position would have to be in front of the media to explain that, and that's something that I'm very thankful you were saying, hey, we were there and we'd have to wait for that investigation and explain it.
Rich made a great comment, I think, and that is simply that you have to remember how you treat people on the street, because those are the same folks who may come back and help you out. The fact of the matter is you can't depend on that, but how you treat people may be just the thing that saves your butt one of these times, and I think that's a point that's very well taken.
But Hadley, we know there have been plenty of taser clips that have been on the national news media, and Joe Public sees it and is highly critical, but he or she may not know what it's really all about.
Exactly. The things, just like the deputy chief was explaining, things happen before and happen afterwards that unfortunately the news either doesn't see or doesn't choose to show. And officers have to make split-second decisions on the street all the time. Using the taser is one of them. This is a situation here where possibly it could have been used, may not have been. He's off of the screen for a little bit of time, and you're not sure whether the suspect is staying close or if the officer's trying to stay close.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen, personally, this officer gouging, kicking, doing anything he can. But a lot of the Joe Sixpacks out there who would have seen this would have said, whoa, this cop is really hurting this poor guy.
And it happens all the time. We're hit in training with try to be nice, try to gain control, once forces, resistance, stop all force and everything. And there's an awful lot of liability courses going on with the department, so we don't have $1 million suits. And I truly believe that some of that has been sinking in, and it has been really detrimental to a lot of our officers in acting, because I've been there, and it's like, well, should I control? Should I punch? Should I get my gun? What is the I mean, this is honestly going through your mind in the middle of a fight. Is IAD? How long is my report? While this guy is punching me. And it's a sad fact, but I guarantee if we interview that officer, he'd say the same thing.
It's a true fact, and let me say this. Officers should remember this. You'd much rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Absolutely. Dead is dead, and it's final. I'll go to something Rich was saying. I remember being a young sergeant and responding to a call on Natural Bridge where a female officer and another officer were actually getting beat by one individual. This individual was fighting hard. I ended up having to take the female officer to the hospital. And in fact, when I got there, to disable this individual, I simply grabbed his legs and pulled him out from under me. He went down, they were able to handcuff him. On the way to the hospital, the female said, boy, what else could I have done, Sergeant? I mean, the guy was just overpowering me and beating me. And I said, well, that's why you have a revolver. She says, yeah, but I couldn't just shoot him. I said, yeah, but if he had knocked you down, the revolver now becomes him and he can just shoot you. And it was like, she was enlightened. It was, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I agree with Rich. We've harped so much on not misusing people. And I'll always say, I don't want to see any officer misuse somebody, but I want to see you survive. I want to see you go home at the end of the day. That's why you're given a weapon. That's why you're given the training. And I think we harp too much on this guy wasn't armed. If he's big, if he's overpowering you, if he's beating you, you need to do what you need to do to survive. If that means use the weapon, use your weapon.
Absolutely.
CrimeTime, an audio and video service from In the Line of Duty, world leader in law enforcement video training. When a sick SOB flashed his badge and claimed to be a New York cop, an alert 11-year-old girl saw through his evil ruse and beat feet out of there. However, the hairy armed pervert had fondled at least 2 girls and been linked to at least 3 abduction attempts in Brooklyn and Queens. Crime timers. We're seeing these reports on our website almost daily. Cop imposters. How does mom and dad, how do other cops know that it's really a cop with whom the public is dealing? Let's go to Deputy Chief Gregory Hawkins.
Well, I think one thing is in training. You have to train your children also. One real simple thing. You never see a real officer go to a 10-year-old or 8-year-old kid and ask them for help. Officers are there to help 8 and 10-year-olds, and they'll always do that, but they don't go and seek help from them. So the first thing we need to do is train our children. When a car pulls up and it's not a marked police vehicle and somebody says, come into my car, I've got a badge, but I want to show you something, police don't do that. We do not do that. A child should be taught that. And even if they err, they'd err on the side of caution. If it was, in fact, an officer who was calling them to the car, they shouldn't go either.
Captain Murphy.
I agree totally. I have a daughter, 23 years old. She traveled back and forth to Southeast Missouri State University. I told her if somebody's trying to pull you over and you're not comfortable, you go to a well-lit area, an all-night gas station, anything. Don't pull over on the side of the road. If it's a police officer, he or she may be upset initially, but they'll get over it. They'll understand that you're a single female and you're out there on the road by yourself. Don't do it. Go to a well-lit area.
What else can these dirtbags do to try to get over on children? Steve Hadley.
All different types of things, whether they're showing their badges or enticing them with candy or something along those lines. Again, just to reiterate the fact that you want to really hammer home to the children that don't take someone for face value right off the bat. That you really want to kind of, if you don't know who they are, then you may want to think twice and maybe not necessarily go up to them.
Rich?
Well, I remember a month or two ago, one of the local television stations did something on children. They actually trained them, spent time with them, telling them what not to do and what to do, and then a day or two later, they would have cameras set up and just have somebody and you don't know what a pervert looks like. There's no description of them. A lot of them are teachers and every walk of life. Walked right up to these kids and with a nice voice and the right talk, were able to move this kid right to a car, I mean, it's extremely difficult to train the kids because they are so trusting of adults. But it's constantly pounding into their heads, be careful, don't go with strangers, the buddy system, where is your other friends, those types of things. And sadly to say, but you got to hope for the best and you got to watch them like a hawk.
Children are taught to respect authority, but they should also understand and be taught that no authority figure would ever say to them, if you don't come with me, I'm going to hurt your parents, or offer any kind of threatening dialogue to get what they want. That's not what a police officer or any responsible adult would do.
I just witnessed a TV episode last week where they showed on the news channel a young girl who had been trained, and this was all set up, where a gentleman was grabbing her by the arm and she was screaming, "He's not my dad, he's not my dad." And they filmed the different people in the shopping center, how many people actually walked past, kept walking, didn't do anything. There was 2 young men that finally, it hit them both. They looked, they started towards the individual, and then they were interrupted to find out it was all a show. But there was probably 18 to 20 people that did absolutely nothing. So we're talking about training 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, but we also have to ask for more from the public also, because if you're an individual out there and you see a car pull up and someone's saying something to an 8 or 10-year-old, you ought to intervene.
Some people are scared of intervening anymore because they're fearful they'll be labeled pedophiles.
I don't think pedophiles. I think they're afraid to get involved, period. Is it really a family issue? Am I going to be attacked? Do they have a weapon? I mean, there's all kinds of things running through your mind. With today's cell phone, in doubt, I say get on 911, watch what's going on, become a witness, make some noise. Bad people don't want to have attention drawn to them. So simply saying, hey, look what's going on, I'm going to call and see if it might be just enough for that bad person to get the devil out of there.
We've all seen the surveillance video of little Carly Bruscia in Florida being accosted by that scumbag who ended up raping and killing her, correct?
Yes. Right.
What did he say to that little girl? She didn't appear to be fighting him initially. What few words could he possibly have said to this poor little girl to get her to accompany him?
Could have said anything. Could have said, hey, your dad was hurt in an accident, that your mother sent me over to intercept you on your way home so I could take you to the hospital. Could have said anything.
I mean, I just have no doubt that if we filmed our own kids, and if somebody went up and grabbed them by the arm and said, you're coming with me or I'm going to kill you right now, they'd be in shock. I mean, what do you teach them? Don't leave the first scene.
Right.
because the second scene is where you're going to get killed, you know. So fight like the devil. So as you grow up and you train these kids, anybody does it, scream, yell fire, whatever, because you don't want to leave that scene. But I think under normal conditions, people are going to just be frozen, go into shock, not know what to do.
Even if that person has a weapon. I've told my children, my wife, that if you're in a public place and a person is willing to use a weapon there, you better believe that what they're trying to accomplish is to take you to an isolated location and they're going to use that weapon. At least it's a bad situation, but you can get some medical help, hopefully, if they use that weapon in a public place.
One other thing we need to do, though, is instill in our children what we will not do. Meaning, my son and daughters have always known if something happens to me or your mother, we're not going to send a stranger. So if nobody from the family comes, don't you leave. If you're at school, you stay at school. We'll get you when we can. I think sometimes as parents, we forget to emphasize those things, and we just assume that our children will know because we've told them briefly, we've made a few statements.
Do you all agree, as cops and ex-cops, that children should not leave that first scene if there's any doubt?
Absolutely.
Never leave it. Fight like crazy.
This is Crime Time, an edutainment service from In the Line of Duty. For a free demo from Karachi to Kathmandu to Kokomo, email us at lineofduty@aol.com. Certain things in life you just never forget. Losing your virginity is one. Losing your virginity the second time is definitely two. But getting tased may well be three. It hurts! I've been tased. And now Taser has developed a way for us not only to have the opportunity to suffer the agonizing little barbs, but also watch ourselves agonizing over the little taser barbs. It's the Taser Cam, which our good buddy Steve Hadley will now put to the test.
The Taser Cam is something new that we've developed here in the year 2006. It's an adaptation to the X26 system, as you can see. Replaces the battery system that we currently have. It's now become a rechargeable system, but more importantly now it's become a new addition as far as being able to record both audibly and visually the actual usage out on the street. The Taser Cam itself is activated by flipping up the safety and therefore arming the weapon. Now I have what's going on prior to a deployment. So all the activity and so forth, the interactions between the officers back and forth and the suspect are all going to be recorded. Then you have the actual deployment if that is something that is needed. And then probably more importantly is even what happens afterwards. As long as the weapon is left on, it is recorded, and therefore we can keep on a tape type version of exactly what happened. We at Taser are probably more excited than anything to be able to help the officers out on the street with the incidences that are going on. No more will we have the he said situations going on. We're going to actually have a video account. Also, too, I think more importantly, we have what is being termed as excited delirium, that phenomenon that is out there that I think a lot of the public isn't aware of. We're going to be able to record that on tape so they do see that individual that does have superhuman strength or is extremely hot in a very, very cold environment and trying to cool themselves off. It's always been related to in words on paper and by mouth, but now we're going to be able to actually show the public that there is people out there that do create a lot of problems for the police department. We do recommend that you leave it on as long as possible because, again, there's things that can be captured that wouldn't necessarily be remembered by the officers. When adrenaline is rushing high, things are forgotten. So this is going to be a good recording of exactly what happens.
I need you to stop resisting. Stop resisting.
And officers will not need to make any extra movements to activate both audio and video recordings.
In most every situation, if you've deployed the taser, you want to keep it on and keep it ready to be used if it has to be used again. You've got officers that have closed in that are now going through the handcuffing procedure. If the suspect begins to fight again, they want to be able to activate it as quickly as possible. So leaving it on really isn't necessarily as different or as strange as you might think it would be. Typically when an officer brings the taser out, he's going to go ahead and arm that taser. He's not necessarily going to bring it out and just kind of just keep it in his hand. So it will be armed. He doesn't have to pull the trigger for it to work, so therefore we've made it as easy as possible. The only consideration that they will have to make is that it is pointed in the direction of the activity that is going on. So a little bit of training is involved in that aspect of it, but other than that, that's it. The Taser cam records up to an hour and a half's worth of video. It's also going to, on the rechargeable system, it'll be able to be activated up to 50 times before it needs to be actually recharged. It is on a loop system, so it is permanently in the recording device. It cannot be erased, cannot be manipulated by a user that might possibly be out there.
And it can immediate playback, of course.
Immediate playback is we just essentially attach a USB cable to it that can be attached to the computer itself. This quick little cable can be plugged into the bottom, attached to the computer, and can be immediately downloaded. We find this as being a good application to possible detectives that have come out to a scene and something that had occurred. They can immediately take this, download it to a computer that might possibly be in the car. And so therefore they can recreate what had happened prior to them starting their investigation. It also has an IR sensor, so it will record in night, and it actually just changes right over. You go from daylight to nighttime and it changes over without having to do anything special.
Is it possible to activate the taser without activating the camera?
Once it's attached, the answer is no. Starting the taser itself starts the camera system, and there's no way to use the taser without the camera being recorded in this recording device.
Put your hands up. Stop resisting.
The officers are very enthusiastic. We've essentially taken an in-car camera system and placed it on a weapon system. So now you don't have to hope that that whole incident occurs right in front of your vehicle. It's going to be wherever you take this weapon with you.
Order the taser cam, mention in the line of duty, and get one of these free, beautifully woven taser cam t-shirts made in Bangladesh. Sorry. Anyway, and order the taser cam department-wide, and Taser President and Chief Poobah Rick Smith will fly to your city and hand wash the chief's chariot. Right, Steve Hadley?
Absolutely.
And how do they get in touch when they want to order the taser cam?
Two different ways. You can get a hold of us via our website, which is www.taser.com, which is TASER, or you can contact us at our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-978-2737.
When you buy taser cam, say, I saw it first on CrimeTime. Sometimes cops find ways to flush out the dirtbags that damn near border on the ingenious because they're so simple. Now, who among us crime timers couldn't bark like a dog if we had to? Rich, try it.
No, thank you.
Ruff, 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 ruff. Kevin, bark. No, somebody bark. Nobody's going to bark. Now, believe it or not, this segues nicely into an incident in which an LA deputy who doesn't even like milk-bone dog biscuits was able to play the role of a lifetime. Shakespeare would have been proud. It seems a barricaded subject had ignored all warnings over a patrol car's PA to surrender, even a threat by the deputy in charge to deploy a canine. Cops were surprised over the canine mention, though, since they knew no canine unit was within about 1,000 miles. So the deputy announces over the PA, the canine is being deployed, and he starts barking. And guess who popped his head up just like an Ozarks turkey headed to turkey heaven? Rich Simfer, what do you think of that ingenious ploy?
I've always known that our officers are some of the most creative people on the face of the earth, and put in a situation, things just come to them, and it's amazing. But that is just one story out of millions that officers could share. We do the same thing in training, where we say, open the car door, slam it, open it again, slam it again, so that people think maybe there are two officers there. You could come up with, and I challenge a lot of the officers who are watching this to send in some of their stories. You'd be amazed.
What is the most ingenious ploy you ever put into practice, Kevin Murphy, or you know of?
Had a burglar that was involved in several burglaries and auto thefts, and I'm interviewing him, and the burglar had defecated at the scene, and he and his older brother and a friend had done the burglaries, and I told him, I said, you know, we're doing forensics on the waste materials, and he asked what forensics was, and I explained to him that we're going to take a blood sample, and he immediately blurted out, I didn't take the dump, but I did the burglary. He said my brother did the dump. So
Kevin, remind me never to ask you a barking dog question again.
hey, it worked.
I can tell you one that I was not involved in, but there were two officers, very innovative. They had gone to a house for disturbance and found that a lady heard a noise in the basement. They went down, and there was a duck in the basement. I'm sorry, a rabbit in the basement. So they took the rabbit, and they were going to dispose of the rabbit in some way. But on the way back, they saw a police car. I saw a car with 4 young men in it. Looked suspicious, so they stopped the car, and they got them all out. They started to search. They asked, "Is there a gun in the car?" And they said, "No, there's not." So the guy said, "Quick, get the crime rabbit, get the drug rabbit." So they go back. They get the rabbit. They roll up all the windows. They throw the rabbit in the car. As you know, a rabbit is always sniffing. So the rabbit's up in the back window and in the front window and so on and so forth. These people are amazed at it. The officer then goes in the car, searches, and sure enough finds a gun under the seat. Now imagine when they went to court, they went to a preliminary hearing, and the gentleman was going to speak on his own behalf, and he told the judge everything was fine until they put the drug rabbit in the car.
Were they the same people who had the poop? Oh, never mind.
The officers denied a drug rabbit. This individual ended up going for psychiatric evaluation.
These all have to be, these have to be interrelated to this story sent in to our website, lineofduty.com, by Oregon Sheriff. It starts out ever so gently. Well, we had a piece of shit crash into a blackberry field and dive headfirst into the thickets. Rich, listen to this. We told the POS the dogs were en route to the scene. The dogs, however, were an hour out. 15 minutes later, 4 deer walked right by the POS, prompting the POS to raise his head and yell out his location. We took him into custody. At the hospital, he had over 100 stickers pulled out of his head and shoulders. POS stated, "Well, it's better than being bitten by them 4 dogs." It was sure nice to watch his face when we explained to him it was deer, not dogs. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, crime timers. The horn dog story will have to wait until Angela Wingo returns because I had that selected just for her. That's Crime Time this go around, and we have certainly gone around, haven't we? Thanks go out, or not actually out, since the Crime Timers are right here, to Steve, to Rich, to Kevin, and to Deputy Chief Hawkins. Thank you very much. We will be right back here next week. Good Lord willing, creeks don't rise when next we converge. Until then, seriously, remember pedophiles have been having a field day since the advent of the internet. Turn the tables on these subhumans and learn how you and your agency can smite the bastards down. Those who abuse animals almost invariably move on to more and more vicious forms of crime. Have you and the officers on your department learned to spot and deal with cases of animal abuse? If not, feel free to contact Line of Duty, where we will provide your agency free DVDs, which will help. You've been a good audience. You're excused from class. I'm Ron Barber. Thank you. You're listening to and you're watching Crime Time, an audio and video service from In the Line of Duty.